Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Compliance with AIAG, VDA, FMEA Standards and Beyond, Integrating FMEA with an Enterprise Quality Management System. My name is David Isaacson. I'm Vice President of Product Marketing for ETQ. I've been with ETQ for about 3.5 years, and I'm really excited today to have Mike Vitek from Sandalwood joining us. Mike is an expert when it comes to FMEA, done a lot of projects in his career, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, David. Once again, my name is Mike Vitek, and I am very happy to be here. I'm an old-time industry guy, going back to my days of General Motors Institute and carrying forward to a bunch of different consulting companies, and recently I was the VP of Business Development and Strategy for an arm of Daimler. So I think I can bring a very unique perspective to this talk today, given that I was an OEM at one point, reviewing all the PPAP and FMEA submissions from our suppliers. I've worked with an OEM, Ford, recently in development of some of their FMEAs and FMEA standards. And then I've also really been working as a system integrator over the past few years with companies like ETQ and getting companies up to speed on how to use products such as this to improve their overall FMEA quality and standards. So hopefully I can provide some unique perspectives today.
I think you will, Mike. It's going to be a good next hour or so for this webinar. It will be a discussion as we go through just a few slides here. We'll talk about the state of FMEA. Then we'll get into the value of an integrated FMEA and QMS solution. We'll introduce both ETQ and Sandalwood. Then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. So let's get into it. So when we talk about FMEA, Mike, we know that this has been around a while. Can you talk a little bit about what the state of the standards are as of today?
Sure. Yeah, so this is my being in the industry for a while. One of the things that we've seen is that during the last economic downturn, a lot of people left the automotive industry. And when they did that, they went to adjacent markets. They went to aerospace, they went to white goods, they went to industrial products. And when they did that, they brought along standards such as the 4th edition FMEA and brought that into kind of the rubric of what they were trying to produce in terms of documentation, in terms of standards for their individual industries. So since 2008, right, people have become very, very familiar with this and very, I guess, accustomed and very comfortable with kind of how 4th edition works. But in the late aughts, a new standard arose, which was really VDA standard. That was driven a lot of the European transplants that came here to North America, and it really became a process-driven solution. So a lot of the people that were very familiar with 4th edition now are going to have to really kind of relearn a way to do the FMEA, which we think is actually better, which is the VDA standard. And it has really been, I won't call it traumatic, but it's been a really good experience for our clients that have been engaged in this, because they've actually been able to kind of change their mindset about how to do FMEAs. It's no longer Excel, it's really a process, and it's become very organizationally driven. So we're kind of excited about the changes that have occurred over the past few years.
No, excellent. And who's complying with these standards now? You started to talk about some outside of automotive, but is this mainly driven by the OEMs, the major manufacturers? Is it driven by suppliers? How is this all coming together?
Right, it's really being driven out of the OEMs, right, in the large tier ones. So they're who, I guess they want to have one standard, right? And I mean, no one wants to have a couple standards that they have to comply with. So a lot of the major players, especially in the automotive marketplace, and some we're seeing within white goods and aerospace, are driving towards this VDA standard, and they're really asking, or actually asking with some kind of heft that their suppliers comply to this new standard. So it's being driven from the OEMs, the manufacturers, and driven down through the supply base. So this is, happened over the last couple of years. Compliance has been a bit slow, but now people are starting to pick up in terms of their recognition that the need actually is there, and it does have to happen. So.
Okay, and do you see any consequences for suppliers who don't comply?
So I think it's going to be tough, for them, right? Especially if they're trying to maintain two different standards, or they're trying to, I guess, take an existing standard that might be based in Excel and trying to convert that over to a process-driven solution that's VDA, right? So what we're recommending to at least to our customers and to our people that are in our advisory group is that they migrate as quickly as they can, utilizing all their existing data, of course, in terms of creating foundational and family FMEAs from those, but really migrate as soon as they can, right? So companies like Ford are already providing what they'll call deadlines. Like the end of the year, people need to be compliant with that. And there are other companies that are out there that are considering putting those kinds of edicts out there. But again, it's going to happen. So we want to make sure that everyone that we're dealing with is at least prepared.
Okay. And with standards, and I'll take some experience that like from ISO standards like 9001 and others, there's a bit of flexibility in the standard. It's not very narrowly defined. Are we finding that with FMEA, this FMEA standard? And if so, how are different manufacturers and OEMs dealing with that?
Right. So there is some flexibility, right? I mean, what it really comes down to is that when we're seeing our clients, they're really dealing with it kind of on three levels. One is internally, how do they want to deal with this, right? So a lot of people are trying to kind of muscle through it using, I'll call it Excel-based particular solutions, and that's been tough, right? To be clear. And then what happens is they get to an IATF audit or something like that, and they find out that they're no longer, at least in compliance, or they've got some things that they've got to deal with because they've tried to kind of craft or hobble together some kinds of existing solutions and try to make compliant with the new standard, and it's not successful. So those companies are trying to migrate to some other solutions, which I think we're going to talk about here today.
Definitely. In fact, you mentioned Excel. That seems to be one of the more popular tools out there today, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's very easy,
Okay.
right? I mean, people are very used to the start on the left side, move right, fill in the row, return, start that way, and so it's very easy. But in the new process, right, you have to create linkages between forms. You have to try to create at least some form of standard in terms of revision levels and linking control plans to FMEAs, and pretty soon using Excel, everything starts to break down, right? So it's a very tough thing to manage for some of our clients.
All right. How easy is it to move from Excel to the new standard then? Just curious.
So it's what we always recommend is that you don't want to do a new tool and a new standard at the same time, right? So what we're trying to get our clients to do is get themselves very familiar with this new standard that you see on the page here, and become accustomed to that, understand what it is, and then pick a tool that actually fits to what that is, right? So for those clients that have done it in that progression, it's actually been quite easy, right? They've been very welcoming to some of the solutions that we've been able to offer because they understand the process first. When they don't understand the process and try to implement a tool at the same time, that's where it can be problematic.
Okay. And I think we've actually started talking a bit about the next slide as well in terms of the tools that are out there. So we talk about Excel already. What other types of tools are out there today to do FMEAs?
Right. So there are standalone solutions for FMEAs, right? That are standalone, right? They're basically that are out there. They've been configured to meet the VDA standard, or they've been configured to meet, say, an automotive OEM standard. So those are out there, right? And we've seen those and we've used those. The pros is that the interfaces are very similar to what you might be used to, so it's very easy to adopt this. What the cons is that it lacks in many cases linkages to enterprise level solutions, right? And the other thing is that we found out that things like data consistency is really not possible, right? So if you want to create standard terminology, or if you want to share information between plants or divisions or even across parts, it becomes very difficult with a standalone solution, right? Our preference, and which I think we're going to talk about, is that we would like to make FMEA part of a higher level enterprise solution, right? So that means get all the pros associated with it, with data integration and data integrity. The cons that we're seeing with some of that is that some people are choosing FMEA solutions that might not always be tied to quality, right? So it might be part of a PLM solution or an MES, And what that creates is kind of a disconnect between, kind of what is really driving the quality aspects of the business and what FMEA and control plans and the like are intended to do, right? So you don't get to take advantage if you don't kind of position your FMEA tool correctly. You don't get to take advantage of things like workflows. You don't get to create efficiencies within your quality organization and the like. So again, we've investigated this over the past few years, and we've tried to position the FMEA product on top of, say, a QMS solution where we think it best fits and creates the most efficiency for our clients.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about that integration with QMS a little bit more? Where would you see some of those integrations?
Yeah, so the reason that we look at, and I guess historically why we looked at maybe adopting this towards a QMS is first and foremost is it's been tough in this space to find resources, right? And they're stretched very, very thin. So when we talk about being able to integrate, you as in the quality space are already out there working with suppliers and really, like submit your FMEA, submit your PPAP documents and things like that. What we want to be able to do is make that a part of the process, make that a part of the FMEA, right? And then you can take advantage of all the efficiencies associated with it. So it's no longer just checking the box, but it's actually reviewing the FMEAs, is helping to create those. And as being part of the QMS, it can drive a lot of different integrations, whether it be Kappa or asset management like. And again, I think we're going to talk about that a bit later, but that's
Yep.
very so.
All right, and I think you mentioned this a little bit before, but why is now the right time for an organization to start thinking about automating their FMEAs?
So I think most of our clients are looking, they're looking very hard at things like their workflows, right? So they're looking to try to squeeze out efficiencies within their business. They're looking to understand where redundancies exist. They're looking to understand where their workers or where their employees might be a bit taxed. And so the ability to automate some of these workflows is very important, right? Because if you can take advantage of it as part of the normal process, there's not that redundancy, there's not that extra legwork. Likewise, I think, I was going to say we're at a very good point within data maturity, right? So if you look at how long things like PLMs and ERPs have been in place, the concept of having, a standard part tree, the concept of having drawings and specifications embedded or requirements embedded within those drawings, that's there and it's become much more mature. So the ability to take advantage of that in those integrations is very, very important.
Okay, and let me just ask one last question about Excel. Is it going to be able to keep up?
No, Excel is not going to be able to keep up, right? Like we've macroed to death a lot of our Excel solutions, right, to try to make those interfaces work. And every time we add a row or add a column or move a file, those links break down, and it just doesn't work, and it becomes an administrative nightmare, right? So that's why we've moved beyond that with most of our clients.
Okay, great. So that leads us to this integrated approach
Right.
as part of a broader integrated quality initiative, right? That's what we've been talking about here. Why would you position process FMEA? We're talking specifically about PFMEA here, and control plans within the QMS.
So one, we like to have direct integration with what we'll call core process management. And what that means is that we want our FMEAs to drive things like issue management, right, across the business. So, or maybe we want that to be aligned with, say, the asset management for things like gauges and tools. Or we want that aligned with, say, the change management process if the FMEA drives some of that. Or even if we're trying to cascade that to the suppliers, we want to be able to generate scars directly from the FMEA. So that integration is available if the FMEA is part of a larger solution like a QMS. You can create links, or you can try to create APIs with other solutions if you kind of put your FMEA tool elsewhere, but it's not as clean and it's not as easy to use. So that's why we are definitely advocates of integrating it with your QMS.
Okay. And what are some of the benefits of this integrated approach? And as you go through that, can you also talk about some of the data that gets shared?
Right. So what we're seeing with our clients is the first thing is that they are starting to look at things like how to harmonize data. So when you're creating your FMEA, I think there's a lot of editorial rights that have been kind of justified throughout the years, especially with Excel because it's been so easy. But creating common terminology for things like failure modes, for things like effects, for things like causes, even recommended actions, very, very critical. And that's one of the benefits of having a solution like this, where you can start to do those kinds of things. Likewise, when you start looking at things like your scoring mechanisms, right? We've seen in the past where people have taken some license with how they do that. And one of the things this brings with having a solution like this is that you can now have standards, right? So people can look and score things consistently between plants, between parts, between solutions. And that's very, very important, especially when you're starting to look at things like audits, or you start to have people that maybe are looking at your particular paperwork from afar. If they can see that consistency, there's a much greater level of comfort that can be attained.
Okay, great. Sounds like we're starting to really get to that confluence of data, of process, of workflow all coming together to provide a larger solution for an organization.
Correct. And also too is that as your product matures, when it goes through the product development life cycle, by having kind of a live solution like this, your data can mature within an FMEA or control plan, which is exactly what, say, like the VDA standard is trying to instill within the businesses that use it.
Okay, and how often, this is the question that's popped into my mind here, how often do you recommend or do organizations go back and update existing FMEAs?
So
and how is that managed more effectively now with this kind of an integrated approach?
Right. So in the past, it's always really been, in the prototype stage, and then when they really have to make their paperwork submission to their customers, right? But VDA really drives it towards a live activity, right? So your FMEA and your control plans really need to be live documents, and because it sits on a platform such as this, that is possible. Right. So we recommend that and so do your customers, right? If you're talking about true OEMs or level one manufacturers, they're going to want your documents to be live as well, and that is enabled through a solution like this.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the solution now. And obviously, Sandalwood is in the business of consulting and building out these configurations and implementation of the enhanced standard in reality with an FMEA solution. ETQ provides a quality management system, integrated quality management system, where the FMEA capability integrates with a lot of other capabilities. So when we look at the standalone integrated or standalone FMEA, non-integrated, it just kind of sits out there on its own. And in your mind now, Mike, this is the old way of doing things, right? Where it's kind of out there on its own.
Right. Yeah, and to start, what we did is we looked at how to build this particular application to the ETQ standards, right? So, I mean, it was very important for us to start with, when we laid out the topology of how the architecture would look for this particular solution, it had to fit within ETQ, because what we wanted to take advantage within Reliance is kind of the standard architecture and the ability to share data across the different applications. So that was first and foremost. Secondly, we also wanted it to be enabled for future development. So if people wanted to build, say, BI layers on top of it, or they wanted to do other things to it, we wanted to have that capability, right? So it was important for us to mature our product in the same way that Reliance had been built. And what that allowed us to do is really kind of put ourselves in kind of the middle of kind of an application platform that allowed connectivity for things like Kappa and change management and asset management and corrective actions and training, right? So the power really became, by adopting the same architecture and structure and integration opportunities, the power became for us to be able to take information that might be resident there because you have that module, or because you've got that, and we can use that. And you, as ATQ, already had built-in, I'll call it, interfaces with larger enterprise level systems like ERP, like PLM. So we can now flow the data directly into the FMEA solution. So we're not keying in part numbers, we're not keying in group names, we're not keying in age numbers or anything like that, right? They can be pulled in directly. So that's why we created the solution the way we did.
Excellent. And I'm going to just reveal how that FMEA now fits into the broader solution. that is provided by Reliance. Those of you who are on the call that are familiar with Reliance will recognize this in terms of the different types of applications that are in there. Certainly FMEA holds a key position in this, but you can see how there is this workflow, this data flow, this connectivity within Reliance that allows us to get to FMEAs and allows us to go back upstream, even to the manufacturing process, the measurement systems that come out from customer feedback. We have the integration with change management in there as well. The whole integration CAPAs flow through there. I mean, it's just a much richer environment for organizations to not just manage the FMEA process, but the entire end-to-end quality management process across the entire production lifecycle.
Right. One other thing I'd like to add here, David, too, is that with some of the individual automotive requirements, like say Ford saying that the FMEA and the control plan have to be linked, and that you have to be able to cascade or to change foundational or family FMEAs from a part FMEA, because you've got this same topology, because you've got this data linkage, those kinds of things become easier for users to complete, right? So it becomes easier for you to apply to even some of the more unique standards that say some of the automotive OEMs are starting to put out there, right? So it's not just linked with a larger solution, but it also allows you to create linkages between documents or evidence artifacts that you have to generate for your audits or
Sure.
for your as well.
Yeah, and being able to support an audit, as everybody on the phone knows, on the webinar knows, is always a challenge if you don't have easy access to that information.
Right.
So, and to your point before, you'll also see at the bottom of the screen where you have linkages to external systems. It's not just all internally linked, which is supported by the Reliance, what we call genetics, which includes connectivity and interoperability, but also that integration with ERP, MES, PLM, and the rest of the alphabet soup that's out there for systems that organizations need to connect to. And the whole idea here is that at the end of the day, we are positively impacting customers, suppliers, employees, the products that we put out. So that's we look at the value in this of multiplying what comes out of any individual application within Reliance.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to mention to everybody on the call, just real briefly, give an overview of Reliance. Reliance is a quality management system made up of 42 different applications. FMEA is one of those applications, and it in fact is part of what we call the new product introduction app set, which has APQP and product specs in there and a few other capabilities to support this whole capability that Mike has been talking about right now. And Mike, in terms of the implementation and the whole solution that you've developed, talk about, just briefly, can you talk about when you come in to do the implementation, you start with what's already in Reliance, right? And then you build from there?
That's correct, yeah. So normally how we start is we start off with an educational process just to kind of level set our clients on kind of what do you know about the VDA process and how does it work, right? And then we start off with basically the out of the box, for us anyway, the out of the box FMEA solution, and walk our clients through how the VDA process has been adapted or adopted within this particular solution, and then walk them through some of the individual aspects of how linkages have been created between things like failure modes and control plans and work instructions and the like, right? So a lot of the functionality has been built, is already out of the box for us, and hopefully what you're able to see, because VDA is more process driven, is also the workflows associated with the creation and management of FMEAs. So that's also embedded within the particular solution.
Okay, great. So when you look at Reliance, it has these standard core applications. Let's just make sure everybody understands what they're looking at here. It has these optional capabilities where the new product introduction in FMEA lives. It also has this platform with a number of key capabilities that Mike and his team over at Sandal would have been able to take advantage of. And it also has analytics in there, so you can then do reporting and analysis of the data that gets collected uh, through the whole life cycle, through the whole process.
Right.
Right. So, Mike, what I want to do now is take a little bit of a left turn and go into who Sandalwood is a bit more. Before we
Yeah.
get there, is there anything else you wanted to just mention? Anything else that to talk about before we jump into that?
Yeah, I think that, for the people that are on the call, I think one of the things that we've tried to do in the development of this application is we try to level it across what I'll call the quality space, meaning that we've interacted with with the members of the ITF, at least those groups that have audited those things. So we've vetted that with them. We've vetted that with like Ford STAs to kind of make sure that we meet their requirements as well. And then we've worked with different quality organizations to try to make sure that what we have is out of the box really kind of matches the workflows for what you're doing on a daily basis, right? So when you're developing the FMEA, that mindset, that concept should be, that should be, the things that you need to check off in terms of like, does it fit for you? We've tried to do that as well within the development of this particular application.
Okay, excellent. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you just to talk a little bit more about Sandalwood.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a sales pitch for folks,
Mhm.
right? But I mean, basically, for those of you that don't know us, I mean, we're basically practitioners, right? So back in the day, we were really born out of Ford's advanced manufacturing technology division. It was called Alpha back in the day. And our charter at that time was really to kind of commercialize technologies to the manufacturing space. And those could be IT solutions, they could be hardware and the like, but it really gave us an appreciation for kind of how technology can be enabled and what it can do for the manufacturing environment. So we're not a big organization, a few hundred people spread across North America, but we really pride ourselves on kind of being practitioners. So if you can go to the next slide. The
Yep.
center, the center of what we really do is the human, right? So anything that we devise, any technology that we promote, is really focused around how do we make someone's job safer, better, or de-risk it, right? So for those of you out there that are, say, supplier quality engineers, what we want to try to help with is that we've seen for too long that people are just checking the box with like, did they submit the FMEA? Check. Did they submit a control plan? Check, right? With the VDA process, we want you to be immersed within that, right? We want you to help create that process. We want you to be involved in the creation of the failure chains, right? We want you to be involved in how those recommended actions come about and tracking those live within the process. And we want you to see, as you create things within FMEA, how it cascades to the control plan and vice versa, right? So our goal in creating anything is really focused around kind of the user or the person. And we bring three unique perspectives, right? One is we have a human factors group that really focuses on kind of how the interface with the human works. We have a systems integration team that is really focused on getting data, live data from the manufacturing environment and pulling that into particular applications. And then there's my systems engineering team, which is really focused on how do we create better processes that enable that, right? And you'll see that in some of the workflows that we've generated for the out-of-the-box solution that we've created. So that unique perspective, all centered around the user, all centered around how they're going to use this particular product, is really what we've tried to craft, right, for this particular application or solution.
Excellent. And I'm going to just jump in here and mention who ETQ is for those of you on the call who aren't aware of us as well. We are a leading provider of quality management solutions. We have a very flexible, scalable, cloud-native QMS. It is, as I mentioned before, 42 different applications that are all integrated into this total overall solution. We have over 30 years of experience, and we understand the quality problems that our customers are facing on a day-to-day basis. And we're able to bring what we've learned through 30 years of experience to our customers when we're going through new product introductions, when we're going through implementations, when we're working together to bring those quality management capabilities to market. And part of that is really having a strong customer experience and making sure that you're able to meet the needs of your customers with the products that you produce, and having that strong quality mindset and the solution that backs that up is really critical. And I just wanted to show just a few of the customers that we work with in the upper left-hand corner. This is where, you know, a lot of FMEA, for example, will be applicable, but there are other industries that also can take advantage of FMEA. And Mike, actually, that's a question that I wanted to ask you. This current VDA AIAG standard is applicable to probably a subset of the market, but the previous version of FMEA is still applicable broader, is it not?
Yeah, it is just because it's been, again, as I talked about earlier, like when people left the automotive industry, right, they took it with them, right? So it's been adopted by a lot of different industries as kind of the, I'll call it the sacred, the sacred scrolls, right, for what goes on, right? But we see a migration towards VDA just as people start to say work with European clients or South American clients. VDA has become a more common language and a more common process, and the need to adopt to at least one standard so that you're not carrying disparate systems, disparate processes is driving a lot of our clients towards the VDA standard.
Okay, great. All right. At this point,
one other item I want
Yep.
is that one of the things that we're very excited about it in partnering with a company like ETQ and Hexagon is that we see the opportunity for even further integrations, right? So Hexagon, we've always known them to be the folks at the end of the line that are doing kind of the part like the CMMs and the like. That data is very rich, right? And should be incorporated into, you know, your FMEAs or your control planning elements. Likewise, like we're working with QDOS, which is another sister company of ETQ or within the family of Hexagon, and we're using their particular application to look at how we can integrate things like statistical process control systems into our FMEA and control planning methods. So we're very excited about this partnership, and we see a lot of opportunities in the future to integrate all of these particular solutions even further.
Yeah, and likewise, we're excited about this partnership as well because it allows us to extend our reach to have experts like Sandalwood, like yourself, come in and help us expand what we have as part of our standard offering to our customers and to the market. So that it works really well for both of the organizations in that regard. At this point, we can open it up for questions. First question that came in was, is the ability in the new capability to create a live FMEA? Right? Roundabout way for me to ask that question, but yes, can we do a live FMEA? Yeah.
With the clients that we have, the FMEA element is live, right? And what we mean by that is that we've really connected through like a singular form, the FMEA and the control plan. So as you make updates, as updates are made to say things like the control plan, that backward correlation is automatically completed, so it's live, right? So that's something we're very, very excited about, right? So it's not just an artifact anymore, but if you change things like your sampling or you add a gauge or those kinds of things, those are added live to the document and recorded in both, right? Because they're a singular form at this point.
Okay, great. And that came from Art. Thank you, Art. And then Alonzo asked the question, is there a link actually between FMEA, dot control, and you just mentioned control plans as well?
Yeah, it's not in dot. So I want to be clear, like most people use dot control to manage things like artifacts. The data that we use is live within the FMEA application, so it's not in dot control. So that might be unique for kind of people that are familiar with kind of past revisions of the ETQ Reliance solution. It is the data resides in the FMEA application.
Okay. And then Randy asked, does this cover functional safety ISO 26262? And I don't know what that standard is, but do you know?
Yeah, so it does not cover functional safety as of yet. So it is something we would look at. There are, to be clear and to be fair, there are a lot of advanced FMEA solutions that are out there that do a lot of those different things. What we were really focused on was first particular application was compliance to VDA and compliance to some of the automotive OEM standards like Ford that had very specific requirements that we tried to match in this first initial application.
Okay. And then I don't see any more questions at the moment, but there was one other question that I had in terms of, we talked earlier about, the standard and how different manufacturers are leveraging that standard in different ways. How flexible is the solution? And this goes back to, in terms of ETQ Reliance being a fairly flexible platform. From your perspective, how flexible is the FMEA solution to meet these different tweaks that these different OEMs might put in?
Yeah, so basically in working with our clients, what we've realized is that there has to be some inherent flexibility. So we try to achieve this in a couple ways. One is through workflow, right? So there are things that we can create just workflow for things like reverse FMEAs, right? So some people would like to do that within the tool, some people would not, but we've been able to accommodate that through creating different workflows. Likewise, there are different interpretations of what data or what forms that you would like to use within the AIAG VDA standard. And so we can also accomplish some flexibility for that, right, in supporting A, B, or C forms within that. And again, really kind of the individual configuration that matters. But as long as we can handle in a configuration, we've been able to handle those requests fairly easily. So we try not to create customized scripts or custom, anything
Right.
that's customized to be able to support that. So if it can't be supported, we generally don't go in that direction.
Okay, excellent. No other questions right now. Just a reminder, anybody who's on the call and want to ask a question, use the GoToWebinar widget on the right-hand side of your screen. If there's no other questions, Mike, thank you for joining us. If there are any last thoughts that you have that you want to impart to the audience today, throw that over to you for closing thoughts.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is this, is that the transition to the AIAG VDA standard is a journey, right? And again, I would encourage those of you that are considering it to learn as much as you can about the process first, and look at what those gaps are to your own process. And once you've got an understanding of that, then a tool like what we've created would be a very good fit for you. So it's a journey. And starting where you should is always important, and then kind of planning the way along, and where we can help with that, we will.
Okay, great. And a couple questions did come in looking to see the solution. In fact, the best way to do that would be to give us a call or contact us, and we'd be happy to show you exactly how this works. Mike, I think you've been on a number of demos for different opportunities, right?
Yep. Yeah, we've been over a dozen so far, right? Yep. So with the combined. Yep. So yep, that can be scheduled.
Okay. Yeah. And as I mentioned very early on, one question just came in. This is for our latest release of Reliance NXG. And if there are Reliance customers out there who want to explore on other versions, let's talk about that and figure out how we can support that. But thank you, Mike. It's been great. Yeah. Really appreciate all the information. I think this has been very educational. For me, at least it has been, and I've learned a lot working through this webinar with you, and appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined us on the webinar as well.
Okay. Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.